Feral cats roam all of the major Hawaiian islands. Population estimates run into the hundreds of thousands. The cats have no predators, but have long been considered one of the biggest predatory threats to native wildlife, and they spread a potentially deadly parasite that can harm birds and mammals, including monk seals and humans. Trap, neuter, and release programs can help, but are they doing enough? Join the conversation on what to do about feral cats. Tonight's live broadcast and live stream of insights on PBS Hawaii start now.
Aloha and welcome to Insights on PBS Hawaii. I'm Daryl Huff. Feral cats may look like harmless pets, but these felines are unsocialized outdoor cats that may never have had physical contact with humans, or human contact has diminished over time. Some of them prey on native birds and insects, and their feces contain pathogens that can harm other animals and sea life. That issue has deepened the divide between residents who feed the felines and agencies tasked with protecting the wildlife. With a population that's estimated to be in the hundreds of thousands, the feral cat solution is out of control. Our panel tonight will discuss possible solutions. We look forward to your participation in tonight's show. You can email or call in your questions, and you'll find a live stream of this program at pbshawaii.org and the PBS Hawaii Facebook page. Now to our guests. Stephanie Kendrick is the Director of Community Engagement at the Hawaiian Humane Society. She leads its government relations, communications, outreach, and education teams. Prior to this work, she spent 25 years in journalism. Holly Holowach is the founder and president of Popoki Place Oahu Cat Sanctuary. The nonprofit is working to build a sanctuary that can provide a permanent and safe home for homeless cats. Its first priority will be removing feral and unadopted cats from areas where they can harm native wildlife. Michelle Barbieri is with the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA, Pacific Islands Fisheries Science Center. She's a veterinarian and the lead scientist with the Hawaiian monk seal research program. Andre Rain is the science director for Archipelago Research and Conservation, an ecological consulting company based in Hawaii. They focus on the monitoring and management of endangered seabirds and waterbirds in Hawaii and American Samoa. And Keone Vaughn is the executive director of the Lanai Cat Sanctuary. The organization rescues cats from protected areas where native and endangered birds live. Since 2014, they've brought in nearly 2,000 cats, with more than half of those being adopted. Stephanie Kendrick, let me start with you,
Sure.
the Hawaiian Humane Society. When we talk about hundreds of thousands of cats, what are we talking about? Are there different types of feral, stray, wandering pets? I mean, or is there a particular area we need to be focused on tonight?
So the population of free-roaming cats is complex, and it's made up of cats that are allowed to roam, pet cats that are allowed to roam, which we discourage. We prefer people to keep their pet cats indoors. It's made up of abandoned pets, which is a particular concern to animal welfare, and it's made up of the unsocialized cats that you described, which are the descendants of former pets who were abandoned on the landscape. So it's a complex population, and it's distributed unevenly across the landscape. And the reality is we don't have very good data. The hundreds of thousands is an estimate that's based on very little real information. And one of the things that we would like to see, and that we have been in conversation with our conservation friends about, is better data on the cat population and its distribution across the state.
You know, Keone Vaughn with the Lanai Cat Sanctuary, you've actually gone through the process on your island, almost like a microcosm of what's going on elsewhere, I would think. What have you learned about these kinds of populations of cats in what you've experienced?
Yeah, it goes back to almost 20 years. I worked for the Hawaiian Humane Society for 10 years, and when I left the Humane Society as the vice president there, you know, the intake for the Humane Society was about 33,000 animals a year, and out of those 33,000, about 19,000 of them were cats, and out of those 19,000, I would say about 90% easily were stray, unsocialized cats. And for me...
Say that again. How of that number?
Now, about 90% of those 19,000 cats that came in were unsocialized or unadoptable, right? And for me, as a former humane investigator and someone, I think I'm the only one on this panel that had to euthanize for the sole purposes of the cat being unsocialized and unadoptable, it really hit home for me. So I decided to make the change and go to Lanai to try to make a difference. And the cats that we bring in on Lanai are truly feral, meaning they haven't seen any human until our intervention. So it's a different scenario for us, but it's part of I would say a tool in the toolbox to hopefully make a difference.
Holly, what about Oahu's population?
Well, we have a large collection of mostly community cats, which are strays that have been abandoned. We do have a lot of ferals that are living in the bushes and away, but the cats that everybody sees are community cats. They've been abandoned. A lot of times somebody will not like cats in their yard and they will trap that cat and take it to a colony elsewhere across the island and dump the cat there. So it's a collection of cats. So we have some that have never seen a human, some that are terrified of humans and come to be fed, and then we trap and neuter them and try to reduce the population through that.
Michelle Barbieri with NOAA, you work particularly often out in Anna Point and places like that. How big a problem for the sanctuaries are the cats that are in the areas there?
As a representative of NOAA Fisheries, our purview is to study and conduct scientific research and conduct monitoring programs for marine wildlife and for fisheries. So I can't speak to specifically the state-managed areas, but speaking about the marine life species, we do see the impacts of cats in our marine wildlife, and the most notable of those that makes it to the oceans is a pathogen called toxoplasma, and it causes a disease called toxoplasmosis.
And then how serious a problem is that?
It's a very serious problem for the endangered Hawaiian monk seal. We know that 15 monk seals that we've been able to study have died from that, but we know that there are many seals that disappear that we don't have the opportunity to diagnose. So that's a small number compared to reality. However, when we really look at the male-female ratio in the animals that we have studied, it's predominantly females in that 15. So that's one of the things that really gives us a lot of concern, because as our mandate is to recover this endangered species, trying to keep those females around is really important. And so we lose their future reproductive potential when we lose those individual seals.
Andre Rain, what's your role in all this?
Well, we work on endangered native birds. And you were talking earlier about this cat crisis. What we're facing is a cat crisis. It's also an extinction crisis. And so Hawaii, as an archipelago that's in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, has a high level of endemism. These are species that are found nowhere else in the world. And they've evolved on islands with no mammalian predators, so they have no way of defending themselves against predators. And so we work with endangered seabirds like the a'o up in the mountains. These are extremely remote areas you can only get to by helicopter. And you find cat-predated birds, if in these not unmanaged areas, cat-predated birds are prevalent. And then it's not just the remote areas. We have endangered water birds like the alaiula, the Hawaiian moorhen, which are found in golf courses and around urban areas. And these are birds where there's only 1,000 left of them in the world, mainly only on Kauai and Oahu. And again, they come into contact with cats and cats kill them. So it's sort of this, it's an extinction crisis that we're seeing. We're seeing birds disappearing. Birds have already disappeared from the Hawaiian Islands and they'll never come back again. And so we have a duty and a responsibility to deal with this crisis.
Keone, let me go back to you again. To finish up on my question about Lanai, have you seen populations of seabirds and so on restored or doing better because of the work that you've done there?
Yeah, so I think that's a very complicated question with an answer that I can only respond to from our experience. And we work very closely with conservation. And, quite honestly, as a native Hawaiian born and raised in Waimanalo, I felt that it was really important to do what I could to protect the native and endangered species because they were here first, right? The humans introduced this cat irresponsibly back then, and now we're having to deal with both. And so what I'm trying to do is really, make a difference. And, when we do have meetings with conservation, we accept all cats that are caught from conservation into the sanctuary. We've been told that there hasn't been a cat predation on Lanai since 2020. So I'd like to think we are making a difference, a positive one for both species.
I've got one question about a specific population, and I don't know that anyone here would know this. What is the panel thinking about feral cats occupying the woods in Hilo? Mary from Hilo is asking that question, but how deep into the forests and so on are the feral cats getting now?
Yeah, I mean, I go back to, the mountains of the Kauai, and you'll sort of be in this extreme remote area. You're coming in by helicopter, you land on this remote ridge, no one's ever been there before, and you start walking around in this forest. There's no trails or anything, and you find this an endangered seabird burrow, because these birds nest in holes in the ground, so they're extremely vulnerable because they're spending months and months in these holes in the ground. And pulled outside is the torn up remains of endangered ua'u or an a'o. So the cats are everywhere, and you see big colonies of them down in the lowlands in urban areas. Like that's where people have their cats and people have cat colonies, but they extend from very much the coast all the way up to the mountaintop, and it's amazing the kind of places that these animals can live and raise litters of kittens.
Holly Holowak, you
Can
wanted
I
to say something?
just ask you, do you know if it was an actual cat that did the killing? I mean, monk seals and rats also go up in there and would kill. So what makes you think that it was really a cat? Was there cat fur there too, or a cat
Yeah.
species?
Or a rat or a mongoose?
Yeah,
or-
I mean, it could have been
Right.
something else, correct?
Yeah, so what we do is it's quite easy to tell what has predated a bird.
Okay.
Based on, it's kind of like being like Sherlock Holmes. You sort of like look at the unfortunate carcass of this endangered bird, and you look at what damage has been done to it. So and there are many predators in the mountains, introduced predators. So for example, a barn owl will lay the bird out on its back and strip the meat off its keel and strip the meat off the neck. A cat, on the other hand, is going to take chunks out of the breast. It's quite a messy feeder. And they also take the back of the brain out. And so you can tell when a rat, on the other hand, will sort of consume they go for smaller chicks, so they'll consume the chick and they'll just be a little puddle. So we basically use all of the signs that are there to identify.
To know what it is.
And then on top of that, we have cameras on the burrows as well. And
Oh, well, that's
unfortunately, we
good.
have hundreds of images of cats pulling birds out and killing them.
Holly, as a real an advocate for the cats, do you feel like we're ultimately going to get to a place where we have to choose one species over another?
I'm glad you asked me that, because that's one of my biggest points. I truly believe, first of all, we love birds and we love monk seals. We really do. All cat people are on your side in that essence, and especially the extinct ones, the endangered ones. That's terrifying to us to think we might lose them, especially any bird that is killed or monk seal that is killed caused by cats. That's hard on us. We don't want that either. So we're trying to find a way to work together, because recently they've talked about culling the cats. And I don't think you're going to get support if you want to cull the cats. But you will get support if you find a way to work together. We believe that you don't kill one species to save another.
Yeah,
you find a way to save them all.
We're going to be talking quite a bit more about the potential solutions. I want to get a
Okay.
good set of definitions about the issues. Go ahead. You wanted to say something?
Yeah, I mean, nobody. I would say we're all animal lovers, and when we talk about cat people versus dog people, I'm very much a cat person. I have been all my life. I have cats myself. They're indoor cats. Nobody wants to see one animal die at the expense of another, but when you allow, and we all agree also on keeping cats indoors, right? Like, we don't want to see cats on landscape, but you don't want to kill one animal to save another. The problem is that when a cat is being let outside, and it's left outside in a cat colony or irresponsible cat owner, that is actually a decision to let that cat be out there at the expense. It's going to kill a bunch of other species. So I think that's the sort of thing there. When you have an animal, a cat that's outside, you're making the decision to allow the killing of other species, which are native and endangered species.
Okay,
I just
go
want to
ahead.
build
Yeah.
on what Andre's saying there, because I think it's really important. We're pretending that this is a conversation about cats versus wildlife, and that's putting a lot on the animals. And what I would like to see is us create a community of Kuleana, a community of compassion, where human beings take responsibility for the results of their actions.
Thank you.
Demonizing animals doesn't solve anything.
You know,
It's a disservice to the cats.
not-
It obviously doesn't work well for the monk
It's
seals.
not really the cat's fault, right?
It's not
I mean,
the cat's
that's-
fault.
The cat's being a cat.
So what we need to do is have people step up and take responsibility for their actions and realize the impact of their actions.
So I'm starting to get lots of questions, as we kind of expected, and we really appreciate all these questions. I'm never going to be able to get to all of them, but I'm going to try and sum them up as best I can. But Michael from Hawaii Island, if you're feeding the cats, you should be responsible to take them home with you. Feeding them is creating more issues for others. Keone, you know, in your experience even prior, is the feeding of cats who are living in colonies a big issue in this issue?
So it can be, right? If it's not done responsibly, if it's not done in proper areas, it's not managed properly. But what I can speak to is our island of Lanai. One of the first things that when I started almost 10 years ago now on Lanai is that we actually ended the feeding and trapping and trap, neuter, and return of cats on Lanai. And that was a big shift. You know, I had come from the Humane Society for 10 years and kind of been ingrained with that. But it's a much smaller community, much different, you know, island than all the others. And so what we did was, in turn, rather than saying, hey, please just stop feeding the cats, we said, why don't you bring all the cats to us? So the first couple of years, we actually focused on bringing the cats from the city into the cat sanctuary. And that was about 350 cats we focused on. And we met with the community and really asked them, if you're going to own a cat, please keep it indoors. And we're going to take it a step further, and we're going to offer free spay and neutering of all pets, not just cats, year round. And so that's something that we've been doing for about 10 years now.
We had a number of questions specific about the Humane Society's role in all this. And so rather than ask each of them and make you feel like I'm grilling you, let me just, I'll just give the three questions. It says, the Humane Society has stopped taking in feral cats. Where else can I drop them off? That's Gail from Kapolei. The Humane Society states that they no longer have a contract with City and County to accept feral cats. I've called other places, no one has an answer. That's Cynthia from Hawaii Kai, so we're spanning the island here. The problem is the Humane Society's fault because it will not euthanize cats, feral or not. So just where is the Humane Society now on this issue? What is your role, and what's happening now if someone brings a cat to you or collects a couple of feral cats and says, I'll take it to the Humane Society? What happens then?
Right, so the Humane Society offers spay, neuter, vaccination, microchipping in return for anyone who wants to bring us a trapped cat, that is a cat that's not socialized to humans. We accept pet cats, we accept kittens who can be socialized, because we can adopt those into new homes. But an unsocialized cat who can't be adopted into a new home, we don't have a positive outcome for that animal except for spay, neuter, and return to where they were living outside. And that's a service that we provide free of charge to the community. But we euthanized feral cats for years, as Keone knows, without solving this problem. It was an aberration for our mission. It didn't support the work that we want to do in the community, and it's not a role we're willing to play anymore.
So just to get clear, so people can bring you cats that they've trapped. What you will do with them is spay and neuter them,
Yeah.
and then you return them, or the people return them to wherever they got them?
People are responsible to returning them to where they found them.
And these, one thing I'm trying to understand, is it a truly feral cat, right, that we've talked about? They're just impossible to keep at home? They won't be trained? They can't be domesticated?
Yeah, they're completely unsocialized to human beings, so they're not suitable as pets.
No.
So Daryl, if I may jump in on there. So one of the things that I learned through the last 10 years working at the cat sanctuary is that I was always under the impression once a unsocialized cat, and I hate the term feral, and all community cats and all the labels that cats are given, because it gets really muddy and really complicated. But the reality is, what I've learned over the years at the Lanai Cat Sanctuary is that through the luxury of space and time, we've noticed about 40% of the cats that came to us that are truly wild. These are cats that are caught in really remote areas and never seen a human until our intervention. Through the luxury of space and time, about 40% have become socialized and adoptable. 60% will always be feral, but the 40% we have rehomed.
Okay, let me move on. I want to get Michelle Barbieri from NOAA involved here. A couple of questions. What is Hawaii's estimate Hawaiian seal population as compared to Hawaii's estimated feral cat populations? That's Larry for me about. I mean, it's like ain't even close, right?
Sorry. I think there are some orders of magnitude.
Yes. And then are cats the only carrier of toxoplasmosis? That's Burdena from Chinatown. Do you feel like this toxoplasmosis problem can be solved with there still cat colonies near the oceans?
Toxoplasmosis is something that is a disease that results from a parasite that's only and uniquely shed in the feces of felids. And in Hawaii, the only felids we have are cats. So if there are cats outside, they have the potential to prey on birds, rodents, etc., and obtain that parasitic infection, which means that it's going to persist. So the short answer to that question is yes. As long as there are cats outside that are getting infected and defecating in the environment, it is going to persist. But there are definitely some solutions there in the sense that the oocysts, or you can think of them as eggs that cats shed in their feces after they get infected, they are shed in very, very large numbers, millions of them in a short period of time. But they persist in the environment for months, maybe years, but not forever and ever. And so if we can find some solutions to this problem and people can take that personal responsibility and keep their cats inside, and we can find other multidisciplinary creative solutions to this, I think we can reduce the amount of those oocysts that are going into the landscape.
Is it only the monk seals that are affected by this, or is it more broad than that?
It is much more broad than that. So our area of interest for NOAA Fisheries is the marine life, and we know from our colleagues at the University of Hawaii who study a lot of the cetacean strandings around the state that there have been several spinner dolphins that have died from toxoplasmosis as well. But in the terrestrial arena, there are other avian species that have succumbed to toxoplasmosis. And I think it's also worth noting that this is a human health concern as well. Toxoplasma infections are not unique to just wildlife or animals alone, so it can infect people, it can infect our livestock, our food supply, our wildlife, and everything. So the parasite is it's a pretty ubiquitous one, but that's not an untenable problem.
Okay,
Can
so
I ask a question?
sure.
Doctor, not all cats have toxo. Not every cat on the landscape has toxo or will have it in its feces. And so what we're being told over and over and over is cats are bad, they have toxo, they're going to kill monk seals. Let's kill all cats. So what I'm thinking is if we could just change the narrative, some cats may get toxo and may release it. And yes, it's all bad. I'm not saying that if they do and the toxo is in the oocysts or in the ground, that's any good. But by putting a big brush over all cats, it makes everybody, the minute I mention Popoki Place Oahu Cat Sanctuary to somebody, they go, oh, but they have toxo and they're gonna, and it's like not all cats do. So I need to have a little bit of leeway on that so that people understand that we're trying to help cats and help the monk seal.
So putting that in the form of a question, I mean, is there some way of preventing the cats from getting the toxo?
Yeah, and I think that's exactly the question. So if they're not preying on native birds, if they're not consuming other animals, if they're being fed exclusively cat food and they're contained in a sanctuary where they're not causing predation issues, then those threats are going to be greatly minimized. So, an indoor cat is also highly, highly unlikely to get infected with toxoplasma unless, you have some mice around your house and stuff like that. And so it can happen, but if we're responsible with how we're taking care of those animals, I think that it can very much be some cats or a few cats, and I'd love to see that happen.
Let me go back though to really quickly to Andre. When you talk about the cats that are up in the very forested, very remote areas, what do you do about that when you come across them?
Well, and this is something where we can actually see the results of the removal of cats. So you have these areas which are really remote and they have a small number of cats in which are roaming over a large area. So there are predator control operations to remove those animals. And then what we see almost instantaneously is population increases. So I've had the good fortune to work on colonies now in these mountainous areas for 12 years. And the first time I ever went to any of these sites, there were dead birds everywhere, and it's not an exaggeration. There'd be dead birds everywhere. And now, 12 years later, we're seeing on an annual basis this ever-increasing population rise of endangered birds. So it's really gratifying to see. It makes you feel that something's happening, but it's showing the importance of removing these predators from the landscape, these introduced
What
predators
happens to them when you remove them?
Well, in those areas, they're euthanized.
In the area where they live, up there?
Yeah.
Okay. And then how are they now, how do you prevent more from getting in? Are these fenced areas or?
And I think that's another important point is, the cats are everywhere, and so you have to have continuous management because there's always a free flow of animals into these areas. So you need effective predator control in these areas to stop animals as they're coming in to the colonies. Another way of doing it, but this is, restricted to small areas where you can actually get a predator-proof fence. These are very expensive things, and that you can only put predator-proof fences in certain areas because the terrain is so difficult. Lanai is a great example. There's a really big predator-proof fence that's just gone in there to protect the uau. But you can create small enclosures where you can have birds that are protected from mammalian predators inside. But that's not the solution for the mountains because they're huge mountainous areas. These are the last places where these birds exist, and so continuing management and seeing the effectiveness of it, shows that if you manage those areas, you can make massive differences to endangered birds.
So I got two more questions here that are kind of straightforward. We haven't really asked these questions yet. If there are truly no natural predators, how are we controlling the feral cats in Hawaii right now? As Rick from Kakahako comments, cats have overpopulated Oahu since at least the mid-19th century. Cats are not a new problem. Kathleen by email. Stephanie, what's happening out there now? I mean, you folks are doing spay-neuter. I mean, how many do you end up spaying neuter? If there's thousands and thousands and thousands, how many do you end up spaying and neutering in a year, for example?
I'm going to say we did about 5,000 last year.
So it's just a drop in the bucket, right? I mean,
Well, we like to think it's preventing a lot more cats from being on the landscape.
but I mean, okay, well, we don't know. We've heard this 100,000 figure. I mean, maybe it's
And that's
not
bandied
realistic.
about.
Yeah.
There's-
sorry.
Go ahead,
you
Holly.
finish.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to say, in addition to her 5,000, there's another 3,000 that are being done by cat friends and other organizations, and then people do take them to their own vet. And so part of what's so great about the Trap, Neuter, Release, Manage program, it solves part of the toxo issue too, is that if a colony caregiver, of which there are thousands on this island that spend all their time and money every day going out, feeding the cats, and part of why they feed them is because when the cat comes into the colony, you can tell whether they've been trapped and neutered by their ear clip. If they haven't, the colony caregiver can say, I've got to target that one, I've got to get that one, get it fixed. Why is that important? Because then it reduces the population. You're immediately reducing the population. And if I'm feeding it cat food, it's not eating rats and other things that could give them toxo. So it is helping, even though we can't, I want to create a Poke Place, and I want to have it big enough to bring 1,000 cats in there. And even if I do that, we're never going to be able to get every single cat. And there are people on every island that want to do the same thing. And we want to get as many cats as we can. We know that'll be a way, but the Trap, Neuter, Release program and manage is the key. And we need more funding for that.
I got a question just here. Sharon from Big Island. She works in sanctuaries, cats, dogs, problem, not enough spay-neuter clinics. Is there a possibility of getting counties, states involved in covering costs, even if they were community members willing to help? I mean, how much of an investment do we need to make as a society or in government to address this problem that has not been addressed? I mean, Stephanie, you may have some sense
One of the
that.
reasons that we're such staunch proponents of TNRM is because it is
TNRM.
Trap, Neuter, Return, Manage.
Okay.
It's an incredibly cost-effective way to address this problem compared to any other possible solution. You have volunteers who are willing to do it, hundreds of volunteers across the state who are willing to do it. We do, on Oahu, we're fortunate to have city support for spay-neuter funding. The neighbor islands are not so fortunate. I feel for the Big Island. We've been trying to get statewide funding, and so far that effort has failed, but we will continue. But access to spay-neuter is critical to addressing this issue. And when you are doing TNRM well, you have an army of people who are willing to invest their own resources to address an issue that they did not create. These cats are not on the landscape because of the actions of the volunteer caregivers. They're addressing a problem that they didn't create, and they're doing an amazing job. And what we would like to see is more support for their work rather than continuing to obstruct it so that it can be as effective as possible.
That's an interesting point. We'll get back to it. Keone?
Yeah, I think it's important to know that if it was a simple solution, we wouldn't be having this discussion today, right? And this is a nationwide issue. It's not just a Hawaii issue. But to answer your question, in my opinion, I do think the counties and the state need to get behind this issue in a big scale. And it's going to cost a lot of money, and there's no one solution. It's not going to work. We've tried it for decades now on one solution or the other. It's going to involve all of us as stakeholders to get together, apply our expertise, put the egos aside, put the personal preferences aside, and really try to collaborate. And that's what I tried to do on Lanai. And it wasn't easy. You know, it's kind of breaking the mold from the norm. And that's what I think we're going to need to do. But it comes with a lot of funding and a lot of patience.
You know, Michelle Barbieri, right now the federal government seems to be the deep pocket for a lot of rescues of major issues. Is there federal money that is applied to specifically, I know there's federal money to protecting endangered species, but is there federal money to dealing with these predatory animals?
Well, what we do at NOAA Fisheries is to conduct the research that can help inform threats and provide that to stakeholders, to community members, to decision makers so that they can make decisions about these challenging issues. And that's something that we'll continue to do. One of the things that I think is also part of our mission in NOAA is to not just share that scientific information, but find partners and engage them in order to identify areas of common ground. And there's a lot of clashing viewpoints when you start talking about culling or lethal removal of cats and trap, neuter, release, or the various versions of trap, neuter, return, manage. But one of the things that we have found is that if you kind of take an analogy of water is a good thing, but too much water is a flood. And if the cats are the flood, we can argue about the mop or the sponge being the trap, neuter, return, or the lethal removal type of tools that you can use, and that's probably one of the reasons why this gets stuck in a lot of debates and kind of gets to be really challenging. And I think we all can universally agree that there's too many cats outside and that somebody needs to turn off the tap so we can go to that higher level. And Steph and the Hawaiian Humane Society and NOAA Fisheries and a handful of other conservation and natural resource management partners have kind of come together and pulled together some advice for pet owners, because that's one group of our society and our community that can really make a big difference.
Okay, Holly, I'd like to now we're about halfway through. I'd like you to start describing, and then Keone, you can also pitch in, what is the concept of the sanctuary or that? I mean, do you literally think that you could identify areas where you don't want the cats living and have a place where they can?
Yeah.
And what's the scale that's necessary to actually do that?
Thank you for asking. This is important because what we're trying to do is be part of a multi-pronged approach, a solution to this problem. We recognize it's huge. And the Lanai Cat Sanctuary is the ideal model that we're trying to replicate, but we know Oahu is so much bigger that it'll need to be on a bigger scale. We are trying to purchase land that is going to be large enough that we can start small. I can't have 1,000 cats overnight, but I can buy or get land big enough that we can plan to build in enclosures that get larger. So what they are is predator fences for cats, basically. We're going to keep the cats inside. They won't be able to escape. There'll be trees. It'll be lovely. It'll be peaceful. It'll be like a park. People can visit and sit with the cats and enjoy the cats. And our goal is, we've actually talked with the DLNR and other people about taking the cats from the beaches and the parks where they would be the most endangered to the monk seals, and actually we'd love to work with Andre if we can get those cats, and instead of euthanizing them, they would come to us. But part of what we have to do is we want to work with those first. That's our first priority. is to remove the cats from the landscape where they can be a harm to birds and monk seals.
But again, the scale, how I mean, and it couldn't be just one place. You need like multiple places.
I have
around
always
the island.
thought that too, and we need one on every island for sure. I'm actually looking at a 20-acre piece of property because I think that if we get the funding and the source that we need to be able to care for all these animals, I mean, they're going to live with us for life, which could be 10, 15 years, right? So I need to be able to feed them. I need to be able to have medical care. So if we can get some serious funding, then we can bring in more and more and more as we grow. 1,000 cats. I don't know. If I have enough land, maybe 5,000 cats if I get enough funding.
Joni, you.
I know. Don't
mentioned
fall over.
That almost gave me a heart attack. 5,000 cats. And I'm
know,
a cat
right?
guy, I'm an animal guy. But to put stuff in context, when I started 10 years ago at the Lanai Cat Sanctuary, our operating budget was $100,000. And that was for roughly 350 cats and 3 staff. Fast forward 10 years later, our annual budget right now is $1.5 million, and we have 675 cats in our care. We provide a high quality care to all our cats that come in. And I think that's really important to know that, and I'm not trying to discourage Holly or anyone. I've helped Holly in months previous to this, but there's a reality, right? The reality is in order to do it right, it's not just building fences and putting cats and giving them some water and food. You need to provide high quality care.
Healthcare.
So to scale up,
So what's the difference? What's high quality care mean?
veterinary care, veterinary technicians, animal caregivers that feed and care for the cats, and then the funding that comes along with it.
Right.
Like on Lanai, for example, 10 years ago, we had about 500 tourists that come and visit the sanctuary. Last year, we had about 16,000 visitors, which comes out to about 1,200 visitors a month. The past 2 months, we've had 2,000 visitors come from around the world just to Lanai to see the cat sanctuary, and those are the donors. And out of the 1.5 million, I would say 96% of that money comes from off-island donations.
I just to follow up with one thing, I'm getting a number of questions about. Laws in Hawaii needs to look at New Zealand and its outlook on wildlife. They had the same issue where feral cats were endangering the kiwi. They decided to get rid of cats. Hawaii needs to determine what's more important, cats or wildlife, birds. That's Tim from Oahu. Is anyone considering laws like those in Australia and New Zealand? If not, why not? Stephanie, what is the, I mean, was that just a pure, I remember hearing about eradication of rats and rabbits in New Zealand.
No, New Zealand and Australia both have very strong policies against cats on the landscape. The problem is it's not working. They're spending, I can't even figure out how much they're spending because none of their governments want to talk about it. But this has been going on since at least 2015 without measurable results. So I don't think you want to model our policies after failed policies in Australia and New Zealand.
I would disagree with that. I think their policies are geared towards wildlife protection, and they have had measurable results in the areas where they're doing management. I mean, it's it's a simple thing, right? Like if a breeding bird is going to be killed by a cat, but it's not killed by a cat because the cat's no longer there, then that breeding bird is going to fledge a chick or a number of chicks, depending on what species it is. So it has a measurable. It definitely has a measurable result removing cats from the landscape. And like I said, going back to my experiences on Kauai, when you remove cats from the landscape, the birds most definitely respond. I think again, like going back to common ground, because it's a complex problem and so on and so forth, like we can all agree that cats should be indoors. And I do like the idea of the sanctuaries. Like I've been to the Lanai Sanctuary, it's a great, really well-run sanctuary, and it's a kind of in a, ideal situation because it's a smaller island and you guys are able to bring cats in. But the thing that you see from cat sanctuaries is size and capacity, right? Like there's you build the site, you bring the cats in, the cats have to get a certain level of care. You can't so it costs a lot of money, and then you reach carrying capacity, so you have to expand. So I think it's a really important tool in the toolbox. For keeping cats outdoors, and I think particularly in situations where you have a cat colony which is in a really bad area, which is close to like a seabird colony or an important wetland, and you have passionate people who are caring for their cats who would protect the cats with their lives kind of thing, removing those cats and putting them in a sanctuary is a great option because that person then can see their cat safely protected,
Let
their
me
cats.
move on. Holly wants to get in on this,
just-
but I just wanted to also though put this to you, given what Andre was just saying, and I got a question somewhere, someone was saying, is it illegal to go out and feed cats and so on? I mean, can you really get the cooperation of some of the more really activist people who have particular colonies they're taking care of? Will they agree to support removal of that colony?
They're begging for the sanctuary. They're thrilled that the
All of
sanctuary,
them.
they are ready. They want to help. They want to be a part of the solution. I wanted to address your New Zealand issue. The year before this last legislative session, a bill was introduced to do that exact same thing, to cull the cats the way they'd done in New Zealand. And it got so much opposition that it literally broke the machine. The people were going crazy printing out them. You think you get a lot of cards right now. It was unreal. And they just had to table it because there were cat lovers saying, no way, you're not going to kill the cats, because they wanted to drop poison, which could have unintended consequences of killing
Who wanted
other
to drop
things.
poison?
The law that they were trying to create would be to drop poison in areas to kill the cats and to just eradicate cats. The whole idea was cull the cats. And it would have unintended consequences. It could kill other things, and then other things could eat that.
Yeah, well, just to go back to the question that I was asking, though,
Yeah.
is that these folks, and we've all seen them, and we know about the story about the Kona situation where there was a big conflict between DLNR trying to protect the Nene and the cat feeders who just didn't want to give up that location. I mean, is there a willingness in those folks to solve the problem instead of just keep feeding? Like, even if it means I'm going to take
Yeah, so
this
I
away.
just want to push back against
Yeah.
that a little bit, because there are different things happening, right? There are people who are just dumping food for groups of cats that they see. Nobody at either of these tables or anyone who's seriously involved in this issue endorses that.
But what do you do about
People
that?
should not be feeding cats if they're not making sure that those cats are spayed and neutered.
Right, but what do you do about that?
What do I do?
What do we do about those people?
people who are misguided
Education.
about animals?
Education.
But have they been educated, haven't
No, they don't think anybody's helping the cats, so they don't understand that there are colonies that are doing this.
And that's where the management part comes in, and where if colony caregivers can work with the property managers, public or private, where they're working, they can come up with agreements, they can come up with standards, they can come up with mechanisms to keep people who are going rogue and just feeding the cats from being part of the problem. But for that, you have to have effective management. And I want to see this conversation not break down on the usual fault lines, because what I'd like to see is a conversation about how we have to bring multiple management strategies to bear depending on the specific situation. No one, for example, is advocating for TNRM in the forest reserves. That would make zero sense to anybody. So I think we need to look at multiple solutions to get at what is a very large, complex problem. But I would push back against the notion that we have been doing TNRM for decades, because one, we haven't, and two, we haven't even yet started to do it in any kind of a targeted way.
Well, that was my next question, and I wanted to ask Michelle this, and also Andre to a certain extent. You folks know where these colonies are in your where you're out there. You know where they are in terms of in relation to the species that they're nearby. Do you need to set a strategy here to say, here's our priority places where we want to get the cats out? Not just this blanket, get them out of the parks, get them out of the beaches, but are there specific places that could be identified where this should happen first and most aggressively?
That's a great question. I think it's probably very species dependent. For marine wildlife, one of the things that we do know is that it's a land to sea flow of Toxoplasma from
That's kind of what I'm getting at.
where
right,
that
yeah.
is deposited. But monk seals are not just
In one place.
localized
Yeah, right.
swimmers. So where a seal shows up with Toxoplasma doesn't really tell us exactly where it was exposed. And we have been doing some research to look at that specifically on Oahu, where we have had a handful of these cases. And we've seen that the likelihood of us picking up a case of toxoplasmosis in a monk seal is higher within 2 to 3 weeks of a heavy runoff event. But we can't pinpoint exactly where that seal got infected. And because those Toxoplasma parasites that are in the environment, they persist there for months to years. They're really sturdy little things, and you can't see them, you can't track them. So, when they're deposited on the landscape, wherever that is, there's a reasonable chance that they're going to make it to the ocean.
I guess what I'm trying to get at is, and I didn't quite get the answer, but it sounds like it would be very difficult to identify priority areas where you could start and put focused resources.
I think you have that for.
Yeah, we actually we did do an exercise looking on Kauai at all the different endangered species, of which there are many, and then locations of known cat colonies to identify priority cat colonies that should be removed. For example, areas like Hanalei Wetlands, the refuge up there, they've lost 250 endangered water birds, some of which there's like only 1,000 left in the world. In the space of 4 years by cats alone, and those are only the ones that were found. So you can identify areas. That's a really clear one. There's areas like, for example, where there are uaukani colonies, the wedge-tailed shearwater, having cat colonies next to there, which exist, can result in widespread kills. Those are areas like Makawena Point, we see 100 dead uaukani in the course of a short period of time because people are feeding the cats, and there are also TNR cats. They're ear-tipped cats. These animals are getting fed and they're full, but they're still going out and taking out endangered birds.
There's
because
one thing that I've heard, and maybe Holly could respond to this, is that cats don't necessarily, and I'd hate to generalize about cats because I would get in trouble, but I mean, cats, they from, how do I say this? Sometimes they kill for fun. They don't all, it's not just because they're hungry that they are animals that will kill because they're practicing for when they are hungry. I don't know, but
we all acknowledge that cats will kill birds. Cats will kill, but if they're in a colony, now if they're up in the mountains and humans aren't up there and you're not even up there half the time, obviously we're not managing the colony up there. We can't go climbing up there. So we know we can't save every single cat. We know we can't, but we can try. If we can get Popoke Place up and running, and one on the Big Island and one on Kauai, which there are people there that are really wanting to do this. And if we can get the support of the community to say, we'll give some funding to make this happen, we want this to happen, then we can start taking in the ones that are in the areas that we know the most. So for example, Ka'ena Point is a perfect example. It's got a predator fence already that was done to keep the birds safe, because birds fly wherever they want, right? But if you keep the cats out because of new predator fencing, if we can do something like build a predator fence, but let the cat people go in and trap those cats and take them to Popoke Place, then the cat will live.
They need to have a place to take them, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to move. I'm moving as quickly as I can. We've only got about 6 or 7 minutes left. That's how fast this has gone. So, we always kind of look to new science, new technology and stuff in a situation like this, because we've tried everything that exists now. So one person throws out, could scientists develop an additive for the food, given the feral colonies that would make them sterile? No cats would be harmed, but reproduction would end. Judy from Kailua in an email. Stephanie,
it's a work in progress.
Other technologies that might actually deal with this, it's a worldwide problem?
Don't have an oral contraceptive for cats yet. We would love to see that happen and would be at the forefront of trying to distribute it in our community if a safe and effective oral contraceptive is created, but we're not there yet.
Plus, it has to be.
We'd love to see a vaccine for toxoplasmosis.
Exactly. I was going to say that.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah,
we have developed a vaccination program for the Hawaiian monk seal for a viral infection that would potentially threaten the species' existence, but we don't have something for Toxoplasma yet. It's really hard for parasites, but I think we just saw through the COVID pandemic that vaccine development can happen, and at lightning speed. When there's a will, there's a way. So it's definitely not off the table. Treatment of monk seals once they get sick has not been successful. Unfortunately, that's been a really, really tough road. It doesn't mean that we're going to stop trying, but yeah.
I think Coyote wants to jump in.
Nope, I'm good.
No technology? Okay, so I promised you guys I wouldn't do this, but I'm going to do it anyway, because I have a big pile of questions here. Lots of people are asking for the solution for their particular problem. Is it lawful for domesticated cats to roam the neighborhood? Sometimes they poop in their backyards. Brian from Makiki, I can relate. And then let's talk. What do I do with cats that I have trapped?
Oh.
That's take them to the Humane Society and they'll
We will spay and neuter them for you.
except on the Big Island where they may not be able to take them because they're like shut down or.
I can't speak to what the neighbor islands are doing
Oh,
right
no,
now. I'm sorry.
there is a trap neuter group over there working really hard, the Aloha Oasis.
Okay, but that's not the Humane Society on
Oh,
Big
no.
Island. Okay,
Right.
but there are places
That are doing trap,
so if
neuter,
you-
return
if you,
over there.
If you get a cat, you take it to one of these places, it will at least get spayed and neutered.
They're working on having a spay neuter clinic happening on like every month or every couple months. They bring vets in to do that.
What can I do about my neighbor's cat who poops in my yard daily? When I approach my neighbor, they brush me off. Who can I call to help intervene? There are so many outside my house. They continue breeding. Sally, Anonymous, everybody's upset about cats in their yard. So, any
So
suggestions?
we
What
have
do
the Hawaiian Humane Society on its website has a whole page on humane deterrence that you can use to keep cats out of your yard, off your car, et cetera, if you're upset about your neighbor's cats. On Oahu, and again, I can't speak for the neighbor islands, but on Oahu, if you have a neighbor who seems to be overwhelmed with the breeding population of cats, please call us and our dispatchers can have our field services team go out and educate them, offer them spay-neuter services. We can see if we can get the population under control. No one wants to see breeding populations of cats on the landscape.
Well, you talk about breeding populations, but how do we know if they're breeding or not breeding? I mean, we have to,
Typically, you see kittens if they're breeding.
I'm sorry.
Good indication.
I know. My job is to ask dumb questions. When I mean,
Good answer, Stephanie.
If you're seeing kittens, they're breeding.
Okay, and if I'm not seeing kittens, should I just not worry about it?
I would not worry about it.
See, I think that the challenge is some of the people that are trying to bring in the cats are the people that don't want the cats there. So asking them to spay and neuter and return it back to where they don't want the cats, I think that's where it becomes extremely complicated and difficult.
I mean, again, going back to like if there's a cat that keeps coming to my house, and I don't want it pooping in my yard, and what are my solutions? It's probably already spayed and neutered if it's a neighborhood cat, right? And it's I don't know who owns it. It just keeps coming through my yard. You mentioned non-humane ways of what's the best way to put something out to make the cats go away? Because mostly it's nighttime when they
They're deterrents, right? I mean, there's a sprinkler, motion detector sprinkler called the Scarecrow. You can find it on Amazon. That's pretty effective.
What's it waters your yard?
It waters your yard and your people and people walking by if you're not careful. But there are humane deterrents for sure.
We've got to be humane to people too.
I would just say, these kind of deterrents are great for keeping them out of your yard. But again, I want to draw our attention back to the extinction crisis we're facing, right? We're losing, literally losing species almost on an annual basis now. We're about to lose another species on Kauai. And it's not necessarily just because of cats, but cats play a big role in the extinction of species. And so, it's all very well to keep a cat out of your yard, but the cat's still going to go somewhere else and kill something else. And so I think we really need to, taking them off the landscape, again, it's something that we can all agree with, keeping cats indoors, people being responsible with their cats, having sanctuaries is it's one of the tools, but we can't have cats in Hawaii on the landscape because cats have been birds have been a part of the islands since before humans arrived. They've been an important part of Hawaiian culture. They're in the Kumulipu, the Hawaiian creation chant. People have used them to find the islands in the first place, and so we have a duty of care to these endangered and endemic species.
Daryl, I just want to jump in really quickly.
Yeah.
The Lanai Cat Sanctuary cares about both species, right? The endangered species and the cats. And we take it to the next level, right? So we bring in this truly feral wild cat who hasn't seen a human till we intervene, bring it to our sanctuary, and the 40% that become adoptable and socialized, we take it to the next level. If that cat came from a bird-sensitive area, we agree not to adopt that cat out locally on island to any resident.
Let me ask, so when you adopt out a cat, do you tell the person keep the cat in your house?
We do, absolutely. But here's the kicker to it. Like I said, we bring in the cat from a bird-sensitive area. That cat gets only adopted out of state. That's a big daunting task for us, but it's something that we believe in because we don't want that cat to go back into a resident's home and accidentally or intentionally be let out and it find its way back up to the holly and
Let me ask Stephanie,
on the birds.
the last question probably of our show. You know, I've had several questions come in about laws. You know, should we make it illegal to feed cats in the landscape outside? Should we make it illegal to let cats be outside? Should we make it, you know, these various questions? Is there a law that can be passed? Can you insist, as I think Andre would like to say, that cats have to stay inside? I mean, is that what we need to do at some point? I mean, is there a right to have cats outside?
I don't think we can legislate our way out of this issue because that denies the reality that there are cats outside. And so what we need to do is figure out ways that we can all work together to reduce those numbers humanely and as quickly as possible.
Okay, thanks very much. We are done. Mahalo to all of you for joining us tonight. And we thank our guests, Stephanie Kendrick from the Hawaiian Humane Society, Michelle Barbieri from the Pacific Islands Fishery Science Center, and from the Lanai Cat Sanctuary, Keone Vaughn, Holly Holowak with Popoki Place Oahu Cat Sanctuary. I wish you the best of luck.
Thank you.
And Andre Rain from Archipelago, I keep blowing that word, Research and Conservation. Thank you. Next week on Insights, it's a project that's been talked about for years. Federal money is coming in for a pedestrian and bicycle bridge to be built over the Alawai Canal. It would connect Waikiki with Macaulay and Mo'iliili, but not everyone wants the easy access, especially for the cats. Please join us then. I'm Daryl Huff for Insights on PBS Hawaii. Aloha.